Hello, and welcome to our composite video for week 3 of RPG A Day for 2022. You may notice that there's somebody in this video with me. And, well, this is Lily. And Lily's in the process of falling asleep right now. We picked her up from a local shelter yesterday, and she's fitting in with the pack really well and filling in that very large void that Dory's departure left. And while I'm not always one to say when you suffer a loss, you should immediately try and fill that space, there are times when it's necessary. And she certainly needed our help, and we certainly have the space. So here she is, making her first video appearance. And what she's looking at are dice. I've got 2 dice over here to begin with day 14 of week 3, which begins with Suggestion Sunday, where what I propose to do is make one suggestion and then tag a number of friends in social media when I release this video, and hope that we can start a conversation about this recommendation that I'm making. Although now I've just recently watched a video on the JDRD30 channel, which is Francois Letarte, where he talks about role-playing games. And usually he talks in French, but every once in a while, like during the RPG A Day events, he will also do videos in English. And what he did was he decided on who he was going to make his suggestions to, and he gave a targeted, direct suggestion to each of them. And I think that's awesome. It's something that I wish that I had time to do. However, maybe I'll do an addendum. For right now, there's one suggestion that I'd like to make, and there are a random number of people that I would like to tag. Now, I've got here a D9, and this is the die that I would like to use. Where's the 9? There it is. I've got a D9. Right? This is the die I would like to use, but it's only going to generate a number between 1 and 9. And of course, 9 is important because this is the 9th year of RPG A Day. We picked a D8 plus 1 because that will give us a minimum of 2. Right. So a little bit of Mithras math going on there. Okay, so let's roll the die and see how many people I'm going to tag, and then we'll forget about the dice and move on to the recommendation. And disappointingly on the D8, I rolled a 2. So that would be 3 people. That's not so bad, I guess. But what would I have gotten if I had rolled the 9? I got an 8. That's pretty cool. Maybe I'll go with this. We'll see. Anyway, the recommendation that I had planned to share for this year, I mean, everybody knows that I am very fond and constantly recommend a lot of the Mithras properties. You know, there's a new superhero game out for Mithras now, and you know, all the mythic, mythic Britain, mythic Constantinople, Babylon, this kind of things. There's so much stuff for Mithras, and of course, Ubiquity. We can't stop talking about Ubiquity around here, and there's a lot of things that we talk about all the time. So I'm going to go into a tier of games that I do recommend from time to time, but haven't recommended for a while. Things that haven't made it into play on the channel and that sort of thing, but have made it into play elsewhere. So the title that I would like to recommend to the people that I tag is Corporea. You may remember, and you'll be able to go back through playlists to find my videos on Corporea. You might remember it. This had the tagline, Knights in Shining Armani. It's a fantastic blend of utopian and dystopian elements in a future which is just a little bit ahead of tomorrow, where the technology that exists is recognizable yet advanced, where the society that exists is predictable and maybe in parts better than our own current society, but certainly heading into dark and dangerous directions. The game system is satisfying. It has a level of complexity where you can get into interesting and satisfying situations with things like combat and with things like magic and with things like dealing with computer systems and the like, where you can interestingly investigate without relying on the same sort of roles all the time, and that sort of stuff. But it's not so heavy that it will take a lot of investment to learn. Not only that, but the way the PDF and the print book have been put together, it's like somebody actually wanted someone to use the book to learn how to play the game. It's pretty amazing in that regard. The PDF is fully linked throughout. You can go from one concept to other instances of that same concept in the book. You can jump directly to page numbers. The example character sheet at the beginning of character creation is all hot linked, so you can go to the section that talks about, how to do that part or what that part is for. And it's just, it really should be the standard of what we get on drive-through. There's very little excuse for it not to be the standard. So this is a full color product. It's got great art. And one of the conceits of the game, something which is a secret to the people who live in the game world, but which is part of the opening choices that you make when you decide to play the game, is that there are, in addition to all the other magical mysteries and things which are happening in the setting, the Knights of the Round Table are being called, right? If you're at all familiar with Arthur, you realize that he falls in his last battle and he's taken away, the once and future king. And maybe if our need is great enough, he will return. Well, there are signs that maybe we're in that kind of situation, that the straits are very dire because other knights are beginning to incarnate in others, right? And like I say, this is not known. It's not appearing on the nightly news yet. One of, or several of the options that you can choose as a player of the game is to play such a knight and work with other such knights. And so there's a lot of fun there. Knights in shining armani. So you have different impulses crashing together in this game for satisfaction, not necessarily to create a lot of mindless conflict, but to create a lot of challenge for a variety of different setups. You can play it as a Monster of the Week kind of game, so suitable for one-shots or as an alternate game. So every once in a while we do an investigation in Corporea. You can set it up as a rise to power and prestige within a corporation in this world. You can set it up as dealing with a far-reaching plot or an awareness of coming darker days, and what are we going to do to resist it. You can go as deep with it as you like, and there are a lot of tools to draw on from magic and occupations that are beginning to rise up, harnessing magic, and the invasive nature of the media, the pervasive nature of corporations, and cryptids running the streets. So the game has a lot to offer and is very accessible for play, making it an ideal new game, making it an ideal introductory game, making it an ideal alternate game, or making it ready for moving into a long-form campaign. So that's my recommendation. Corporea by Mark Plemons from Brabblemark Press, and I will tag a large number of people, probably. Okay, for Monday, August 15th, which is a huge and important holiday here in the Republic of Korea. This is Independence Day, and they'd ask, who would you like to game master for you? And I'm of two minds about this. In our online group, we have a young man, a gentleman, who grew up liking the same sort of stuff that I did, exposed to the same sort of pulp heroics and westerns and good, honest notions of right and wrong and good and evil and that sort of stuff. His name is Jose, and you can see him playing Sergeant Kaminsky in our ongoing Alien campaign. Well, he claims to have given up game mastering, and that makes me sad, and I think he's got a real talent for characterization. I think he has a real strong grasp of how the world works. I think he has a strong grasp of how the fiction that our group likes is given its power and the things that make it sing. So I imagine that there is lurking within him a lot of fun experiences with him as the game master. So I'd like to recommend Jose as a person that I would like to game master for us. Outside of that, like if we go into fantasy, who would you like to game master? You can choose anyone, living or dead. I've got some sad answers of people no longer with us that I would that people who've watched the channel for a long time will recognize. But let's have some fun. Who would you like to game master for you if you could have anyone in the world do so? I'm going to go with Walter B. Gibson. Who's Walter B. Gibson, you ask? Isn't that neuromancer guy, Burning Chrome? No. Different Gibson. Walter B. Gibson is the creator of The Shadow, among other characters. He started out as a newspaper man and then was able to support himself and his family by the power of the pen, the typewriter, actually during the pulp era, and gave us hundreds of Shadow novels and radio plays. But not just this. Not just an author, also a magician. A stage magician, and one able to hobnob with other magicians, even one so famous as Harry Houdini, who he did some ghostwriting for. So imagine an incredibly prolific pulp author, trained in performance, trained in misdirection, writing in a form of fiction built from strong clue-based deductions and strong characterizations, both good and evil, able to respond quickly to demands of the publisher, demands of the public, and able to focus on producing content that endures decades later. Think, with a little bit of practice, he would make a fantastic game master. And that's something that, if I could have anything in the world, I think that would be great. Day 16, Tuesday, August 2022. The prompt for this day is, what would your perfect game be? It's kind of a tall order. What would your perfect game be? For me, it's the whole experience. So imagine this. Imagine a campaign. I'm going to choose a Delta Green campaign because that's on my mind these days. But a Call of Cthulhu campaign, a Cold War Cthulhu campaign, World War Cthulhu, maybe even Octoon Cthulhu. It doesn't really matter. But one of those cosmic horror games, to one degree of pulpiness or another, like none at all or pretty pulpy. And imagine a group of 5 people, maybe 6, as the game group. And imagine that each of them is comfortable game mastering that game and enjoys playing in that game. Then imagine giving each of them an era. So one game master takes one period of time, the next game master another period of time, and so on, all the way around the table. And the perfect game for me would be a campaign game. It would be a long-form, open-ended unplanned story as byproduct running of an in-character as character exploration of cosmic horror with troop style play and round robin game mastery. So we would arrive and we would pass off game mastering duty. So one night we play in the one game master's game, and the next night we play in someone else's game, and so on and so forth. And we go down through the ages that way. We have multiple characters, and over time we see what happens. What is the story of this setting? That would be my perfect game. Day 17, prompt 17 for RPG Day 2022 is about the past, the present, and the future. And that's when is your favorite game set? And it's difficult for me to choose a favorite game. I have a lot of games that I really like. But I really like science fiction and future games. My deep involvement in Star Wars role-playing games, in BattleTech and the like over the years kind of demonstrates this. Now you might have said, well, why wouldn't you have chosen to live, in the Star Trek universe last week? But this really has something to do with, if I were sent there, I would want to be useful, and I'm not sure how useful someone from our time and with the skills and interests that I have, I'm not sure how much value I'd have in that future. But when we have the opportunity to imagine, right, to choose the world in which we set our imaginations loose, it always seems to be the future to which I go. And it doesn't take a particular form. It's not always a hard science future. I really enjoy Blue Planet, but I also enjoy Star Wars and Star Trek, and all three of these have totally different ways of involving technology and elements of fantasy and elements of heroism and elements of adventurism and that sort of thing. So looking to the future is something I find interesting and exciting. When I think about space travel, when I think about the possibilities of faster than light travel, or at the very least generational travel, there are so many different ideas that come to mind. So yeah, past, present, or future, it's the future for me. The prompt for day 18 is, where is your favorite place to play? And honestly, when it's possible, and it hasn't been possible for a very long time, I like it when people can come to the house, right? Where all the game books are around, and where if the game doesn't end, we can leave things out to pick up later. I like the notion that role-playing games are a medium where there really doesn't need to be an ending point ever, and that we can simply stop, maybe even mid-sentence, and then pick up from that point later on, even years later, as we have demonstrated multiple times on this channel. So where is your favorite place to play? It's in our dedicated gaming space. But because, for reasons that I explained in an earlier video during this very RPG Day, because that's no longer open to me, I've taken a more metaphorical or abstract route to finding an answer for this. My favorite place to play is where my best gaming friends, people I feel that strong connection to, are comfortable, right? So that at times that's been a coffee shop. During our long-running Star Wars campaign, for years we met in a coffee shop, which you would think would be uncomfortable, but having everybody there, having everybody enjoying the game and enjoying each other's company, having it be our routine, one of the touchstones of life, it made it very comfortable. It was uncomfortable when the game couldn't happen. So the physical location mattered much less than the arrangement of of people who were there and the reason why we were there. That's one example. I am a huge fan, but also rarely satisfied with online play. There are barriers that I've talked about, produced by the screen and produced by the microphones and the way that speakers work and the way that our chatting software interacts that diminish the amount of satisfaction I can draw from a particular session. But at the same time, I'm incredibly thankful for this technology, which allows gaming to happen at all and opens it up to gaming with cool people from around the world. So whereas my favorite place to play is online with, with friends around the world. So 3 answers for what could have been a simple question. Prompt 19, our why question for week 3 is, why has your favorite game stayed with you? In other words, why has that game, which you identify as a favorite game, why has your appreciation of it been able to persist down through time? So if you're a relatively new gamer, this is going to be a difficult question. Your favorite hasn't had to weather challengers that often and hasn't had to stand the test of time. If you're a long-term gamer, it can also be kind of difficult because odds are that you've had several favorite games throughout your time. And you might have a habit of saying that game X is your favorite game, but you don't really play it anymore, and you don't really play it the way it's written anymore. And you might hesitate to play it because you're worried about the effect of nostalgia and, kind of discovering that it really isn't your favorite game. And it can be quite complicated, our relationships with our favorite things. With systems, a system that has been in my life the longest is BRP and versions of BRP. It's definitely a favorite. It's definitely a game that I'm comfortable going to do specific things. It's a game I've stopped treating as something I will do anything with. I prefer, and I've really always preferred, to match the system to the game. However, I keep being drawn back to Mithras. I keep being drawn back to D100 games. And then there's Ubiquity, right? So neither of these things are games. These are systems, right? Favorite game. Well, the game that I've played the longest, the game that's been in my life the most, has been Call of Cthulhu. But now I have my own Mithras version of Call of Cthulhu. Now I have the new Delta Green, which made fantastic adjustments to BRP for its expression of cosmic horror in its own particular idiom. And, I have a Ubiquity version of a Lovecraftian cosmic horror game. And I even get to, work on that one. So my favorite game, the lines have blurred somewhat across branding and company structures and whatnot. So that idea of cosmic horror, that idea of investigation, characters being investigators, characters uncovering mysteries, and characters coming face to face with uncomfortable realizations, is definitely the core part of what I consider my favorite game to be. But past iterations of RPG a Day, I've come to the realization that games like Shadowrun, maybe not on the table regularly, but certainly a game that I follow and a setup that I follow, this has definitely appealed to me. Corporea, I've been finding, since I got it, appeals to me even more. It has a lot of the same things that I like about the setup for Shadowrun. It's just easier to play, and it takes up a lot less room on the shelf. So, there are these questions. How do we even begin with favorite game? But ultimately, for me, a role-playing game is about making decisions, and making decisions from a specific point of view, and having experiences from that point of view. So as that character, and in character, as that character experience. And I find that the genre of horror, particularly cosmic horror, so not gore, not a lot of combat, but investigation, problem solving, uh, the gradual realization of these deeper, darker, and unsettling truths. There is something really satisfying about that as a player and as a game master. It's satisfying in both roles. So there are lots of games that I like to run, which I don't necessarily want to have a character in. I want to have non-player characters as my voice in those games. That's where I find my connection to those games. And there are other games that I desperately want to experience as a player. I don't want to peek behind the Game Master screen. I don't want to look into the Game Master section. I want to take one of these character sheets and make my own character and explore that world. So the games that I think most logically fit into that favorite slot are ones that are enjoyable both ways, ones that I have a long history with. And so ultimately that brings us back to a Lovecraftian cosmic horror kind of environment, regardless of which name is on the game. Why has it stayed with me? Well, for the reasons that I've explained. But I guess that's just something that resonates with me pretty strongly. A second place would be kind of well, maybe we'll talk about that in another version of this, like perhaps on the podcast. All right. The prompt for August 20th, Saturday, which will be the last one for this composite video, is how long do your games last? Hi. How long do your games last? Lily has no idea. There we go. Because she hasn't seen one yet, because she's only been here for a day, like 24 hours right now, as we consider it. So how long do your games last? Well, these days, because most of the games are online, unfortunately, games only last 2 hours. Sometimes 2.5, sometimes 3 if we're lucky, sometimes 90 minutes if we're unlucky, or an hour from time to time. Is it enough? It's much better than no gaming at all. That's for sure. What do I think is my ideal? I really like 4 hours. Having maybe 30 minutes to get ready to play, and having 30 minutes at the end to cool down and talk about play, and having somewhere between 3 and 4 hours for play is perfect. Way back in university days and post-university days, where gaming was the thing, where none of us were married, nobody had any responsibilities except to themselves, and showing up to work on time. The games were much closer to 6 hours in length, and so a long game was well over 6 hours, and a short game was 4 hours. But I found after doing that for a large number of years, I found that the best games were where everybody was as focused as possible, and that 4-hour thing became the sweet spot for me. But doesn't really seem like that's in the cards, at least not until retirement. Who can say? How long do your games last? As long as they can, and these days that's about 2 hours. All right, that brings us to the end of week 3, thanks to my special guest, Lily. who's not sure about all this video recording. And you can expect to find daily entries on the written blog at castingshadowsblog.com that will have the same answers, but maybe different details or different things get explained. There's variation there. And you'll hear another version of this on the podcast at some point. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying RPG A Day 2022. I hope when you find cool posts that you share them and tell people about them. Tag people or whatever, or at least tell the person who posted that you enjoyed it. RPG A Day 2022, like all other iterations of RPG A Day, is about talking positively and sharing your enthusiasm and enjoyment for the role-playing game hobby. So it's not too late to get involved if you haven't. Go to the Autocratic blog at autocratic.com. That's Autocratic with a final K. And you can find the RPG A Day 2022 list of questions in an easily downloadable image. And you can leap into action without missing a beat. Anyway, take care.